Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Khalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is Human Settlements Planning. The topic we will be delving into is urban planning and urban renewal. In this lecture, we will discuss the role of JNN-URM. What are the basic salient features of JNN-URM? Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission was the most ambitious urban program in the history of India. This is an attempt by the Government of India, an initiative at aiming to encourage reforms and fast-track planned development of identified cities. This was taken up as a pledge, as a way to change the urban fabric of the country, city by city, town by town. Focus is on efficiency in urban infrastructure and service delivery mechanisms, community participation and accountability of ULBs or parastatal agencies towards its citizens. Total support is from the Government of India. It's about 50,000 crores with matching contribution by cities or states over the next 6 years. That is 2006 to 2012. Investment of around 150,000 crores is envisaged. So, the primary objectives of the JNN-URM is to create economically productive, efficient, equitable and responsive cities. In line with this, the mission focuses on integrated development of infrastructure services, securing linkages between asset creation and maintenance for a long run project sustainability, accelerating the flow of investment into urban infrastructure services, planned development of cities including the peri-urban areas, outgrowths and urban corridors, renewal and redevelopment of inner city areas, universalization of urban services so as to ensure their availability to the urban poor. So, this mission was not only set for the cities as such, for the services that are attached to the cities, infrastructure based, transport based, it could be redevelopment of inner city areas, it was universalization of urban services and to mainly reach the urban poor. As this country has been modernized as well as urbanization is the main scenario in our country, the main increase in poor population is not in the rural areas anymore, but the urban poor. So, JNN-URM is targeted towards them to rehabilitate their lifestyle as well as the cities that give housing to such people. If you look at the main objectives, it mainly encourages reforms and fast track plan development. So, number one is to integrate development of infrastructural services, ensure adequate funds to fulfill these deficiencies, plan development of cities, provision of different services for the urban poor, redevelopment of old cities and finally, secure effective linkages between asset creation and asset management. So, you have two tracks over here. Track 1 is for 63 identified cities and the second track, which is the subsidiary track, is for other cities. We will be discussing only the role of JNN-URM. Now, if you look at this, you have a particular timeline that is set for reform and agenda. Urban lower classes you have category A, mega cities which is more than 4 million population, 7 cities have been identified. One of them is Bangalore in Karnataka. Category B is million plus cities, which is between 1 to 4 million population. 28 cities have been identified. And category C is cities with less than 1 million population. 28 cities have again been identified. Mysore in Karnataka. As of 2012, Gujarat being the only state to have achieved all 10 reforms required by the mission. 5 states have achieved 9 out of these 10 reforms: Andhra, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Orissa and Uttar Pradesh. Public disclosure and community participation laws have initially progressed slowly, with only 5 states managing to enact them as a part of the reform agenda as of 2009. However, as of 2012, community participation laws have been enacted by 22 out of 31 states and public disclosure laws were enacted by 27 states. 20 states had decentralized the responsibility for water supply and sanitation from the state level to ULBs, and 19 had done so for city planning functions. Now, if you look at different components of JNNURM, you have admissible components, inadmissible components. The admissible components are urban renewal, water supply, which includes even desalination plants and STP, that is sewage treatment plants, solid waste management, stormwater drains, urban transportation like buses, MRTS, parking spaces, development of heritage areas, prevention and rehabilitation of soil erosion, but that is useful only for special category states like Jharkhand, where you are usually set by, there are a lot of setbacks because of natural calamities, preservation of water bodies. Inadmissible components are the basic components that are taken care by the other departments like power, telecom, health, education and wage employment and staff components. Now, mandatory reforms, you have city level as well as state level. You have actual based double entry system of accounting introduction, reform of proprietary taxes with GIS, levy of reasonable user charges, internal earmarking of budgets, provision of basic services to the urban poor. These are reforms that we have been discussing till now. Now, if you look at the optional reforms, you have revision of building bylaws and streamlining approval building processes. Usually, when you look at the role of JNNURM, they focus only on their short reforms that they can and they will accomplish. The optional reforms are left for the second category of JNNURM. So, what they tend to do is they try to revise the bylaws which not only change the building processes, but also help non-agricultural resources like industries, light as well as heavy. It even introduces computerized process of registration of land and property, so it makes the life of the common man easier. Revision of bylaws to make sure rainwater harvesting becomes mandatory in all buildings, and it also makes sure that all water conservation measures are being adopted. Bylaws for reuse of recycled water, administrative reforms, structural reforms, encouraging a lot of private-public partnership. Now, if you look at funding patterns, cities with more than 4 million plus population, grants are given 35% by the center, 15% by the state, and parastatals, that has to be given equally by the rest of them, is 50% by individual cities and other bodies. Cities with million plus but less than 4 million population, you have 50% given by the center, 20% by the state, and ULBs have to contribute 30%. Cities in northeastern states and Jammu and Kashmir, center provides for 90%, state takes care of only 10%. Other cities, center takes care of 80%, state 10%, and ULB takes care of the rest 10%. Desalination plants, this applies for any city. 80% is taken care of by the center, 10 by the state, and again 10% by ULBs. Now, if you go about evaluating the JNNURM and how their work has been performed and how is it that their activities are tracked in our country, Number one, the questions we need to ask are, what reforms have happened over a period of time? What proportion of the development has actually been fast-tracked? What efficiency in urban infrastructure and service delivery mechanisms has been achieved? What community participation has happened? What accountability of ULBs, parastatal agencies towards citizens have been established? Now, the next stage of the JNURM, the second phase, which is the Rajiv Awas Yojana. This has been applied only in 2012. Minister UD Kamalnath has announced the second phase of the JNNURM in July 2012. We have not been receiving any public information about this. We have the basic data regarding this. Around 200,000 crores have been expected to be spent, double that of the first phase. How will this be different from the first phase? Almost all cities and municipalities to be covered, including all JNNURM cities. More freedom is going to be given to the states, because when states are not directly involved or power is not given to them, the center might not be aware of the problems each city faces. That is more region specific and state specific. So, by giving more freedom and power to the states, a better prospectus can be expected. Larger role envisioned for private players. Focus is going to be on capacity building, that is, increase in recruitment of skilled manpower for cities, training programs for existing workers. Land monetization will be important, that is, selling existing municipal land or otherwise extracting revenue from it. JNNURM is likely to obtain UIG activities, that is, all urban poor spending to go under RAY. Rajiv Awas Yojana, this was actually announced in 2009, but it began its work in 2012. The goal was primarily to promote slum-free cities by upgrading and formalizing all existing slums, both which have been declared as well as undeclared, preventing development of new slums by providing affordable land as well as housing. States must agree to give property titles to the poor to qualify for funding. The key actors or the stakeholders in this, the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, the RAY nodal agency at the state level. This is responsible for receiving funding, mapping and surveying slums, identifying the development model for each slum, preparing the slum, zone, city level plan of action, that is plan of action, managing implementation of projects, survey being done by consultant Darashaw and Co. How does the RAY work in every state or city? There are two stages, planning and implementation. Planning actually includes preparing legislation for assigning property rights, slum surveys, slum mapping, preparing a state level plan of action and all city level plans of action, or at least putting together databases of all slum populations that can be used for planning. Plan of actions need to have redevelopment plans for every slum that has been identified in the city. The slums that I have identified could be both registered as well as not registered, on the basis on which projects will be prepared and money will be sanctioned. And you have to take this step by step. By taking all the slums together, when funding is not there, it is going to cause a lot of chaos. It has to be done first as the planning is happening, even which slum is going to be taken up first, and the order and hierarchy based on which requires immediate intervention should be sanctioned. Now, what is the current status of RAY in Chennai? In December 2010, Darashaw began mapping in Zone 10. Now it has expanded to other zones. May 2011, TNSEB, which is the Slum Clearance Board, began working on GIS and MIS for slums. June 2012, government has authorizing hiring a project coordinator to write slum-free city plan for Tamil Nadu. So, what usually is the negative aspect of this is, when you identify slums, it is not the poorer neighborhoods that are chosen. It is only the slums that are not in a permissible area without permission that are built are considered slums. So, sometimes the older buildings that have been provided by the slum clearance board, even they are currently in the area of such slum dwelling units, but they will not come under this program. You have a number of slum dwelling areas in Koturpuram and Adayar which have been built by the slum clearance board around 20 to 30 years ago, but they too are degenerating over time because of certain floods, rains and other wear and tear issues. But that does not come under this. It is only the slums which are recognized as unplanned, which do not come under the purview of the Tamil Nadu Planning Authority. Only those are recognized as slums, and that will come under this plan. So, when you actually decide to make Tamil Nadu slum free, the older slums which have been cleared and apartments that have been given to them, those are still going to be equivalent to every other slum that is there in the city, because they do not have proper water, they do not have electricity, their approach to services like bus services or other transportations provided by the city is inadequate. So, all of those also have to be upgraded. Till then, you cannot be considered a slum free city plan for Tamil Nadu. Now, what are the opportunities RAY offers? States and cities can decide redevelopment models and construction methods. People can even build homes themselves. Mapping supposed to include all slums, declared and undeclared, and all vacant lands in the city to identify locations for relocation nearby if required. Involvement of the community is required and in mapping, and if the consultant is hired, he too should be involved along with the community. Again, when these vacant lands are identified by these consultants, they do not take into consideration of the original slum. For them, it is basically number of slums, number of families housed in those slums, and where they can be re-accommodated. But when you look at the occupation, for example, a particular slum that is by the Marina Beach, their occupation predominantly is fishermen. Not predominantly, they are fishermen communities that are settled there. But if you give them the second group of housing that is going to be given to them as an alternative, if it is going to be far away from the beach, that cannot be actually used by them, because it is away from their main source of occupation or bread. So, when that happens, there should be a sense of dialogue between the community and the consultant, and any vacant land or relocation of the slum authorities that is going to be done by them has to be done in a nearby area conducive to their older neighborhood or their older profession. And if at all they are going to be completely relocated for their safety, it has to be done in such a way that they are given alternate methods of earning their occupation or giving them newer job opportunities, and if that job opportunities require certain amount of training or vocational training, that too has to be given to them. All maps and lists of slums and households are supposed to be presented before the community for ratification. States must agree to provide property rights for the poor, and later allocations of funding are based on city and state meeting certain milestone towards passing proper rights legislation. So, this is where a huge gap happens. Usually the property is never given to the poor. They have to give a lot of memos, and it is only after that the patta or the land rights is given to them. If the land right is only given to them, only then will the funding be released. So, usually what happens is, because of this gap in the dialogue, and the whole process gets delayed or degenerated. The state is to set up an unbiased dispute resolution mechanism. This is easier said than done. Politics plays a crucial game over here. You have different political parties, different voting banks coming from different slums. So, all of that does play a very important and crucial role, and it usually doesn't remain unbiased. What are the important concerns with respect to RE? States can access first tranche of money even without enacting any property rights legislation. No specified penalties if state does not include the community in RE planning process. No safeguards in place to prevent large displacement, relocation and evictions. So, if you look at the main concerns over here, they are vast. It does not encompass and actually support the urban poor. There are a lot of loopholes for the state government to get by without actually giving them the land rights or the patta rights. Then if a community is not particularly included, even that doesn't have to be specified. And if at all their large communities are being suddenly displaced or relocated or being asked to be moved because of any particular reason, there is no prevention or a safeguarding mechanism for those people. So, if you look at this, even though the system isn't in place and a planning model isn't in place, the implementation model is not very sufficiently pro-urban poor as it is pro-government. The government has a lot of leeway while performing these activities. This is the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. This goes hand in hand with the RE because only when a basic infrastructure of roads and other things are specified, only then can a particular environment or a particular city grow. The Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana or the PMGSY is a nationwide plan in India to provide good all-weather road connectivity to all unconnected villages. This centrally sponsored scheme was introduced in 2000 by the then Prime Minister. The program envisages connecting all habitations with a population of 500 people and above in all plain areas and 250 and above in hilly regions and tribal and desert regions. It is under the authority of Ministry of Rural Development that this was begun. It is fully funded by the central government irrespective of where the roads are going to be laid. The goal was to provide roads to all villages with a population of 1000 and above by 2003, with a population of 500 and above by 2007. In hilly regions, tribal areas and desert areas, villages with a population of 250 and above by 2003 and 250 by 2007. According to the latest figures made available by the state government under the survey to identify core networks as a part of the PMGSY program, about 1.67 lakh unconnected habitations are eligible for coverage under this program. This involves a construction of about 3.71 lakh kilometers. At the end of this lecture, we have seen the role, the contribution, the limitations and the details of JNNURM. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. What is JNNURM? Discuss its role. What is RAY, R-A-Y? What are the limitations of JNNURM and the RAY model? What is PMGSY? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.